Welcome to the podcast. Today, my guest is David Hoskot, and Dave's going to tell us about how his journey through a musical life has got him to where he is today, living in Australia. Dave, you started out as an American, and now you're Australian.
That's true.
What got you started playing in music?
Actually, my first musical experience was in 1966 in Washington, D.C. My neighbor had tickets to go see the Beatles.
Oh, wow.
And he invited me. And that was at D.C. Stadium in the District of Columbia. And I saw Ringo and like 1,000 or 10,000 other young men. I decided that I wanted to take up the drums. So that was my launching point.
It must have been an amazing thing because, like you say, so many people from experience seeing the Beatles and were instantly wanted to be, like particularly Ringo. A lot of drummers very heavily influenced by Ringo. Why do you think that is?
Well, first off, I think he was the first time that a drummer, I think, had, besides the big bands, maybe in an earlier time, that the drummer was really featured. Plus, it was the nature of the music. It was popular music. It was driving the girls crazy, okay? He was a good-looking guy. They were all good-looking guys. They wrote great songs. It was just sort of a perfect storm, I think, of and the time, obviously, the 1960s. So it was a perfect storm of all those factors. And I think it just hit a lot of young men where they live, along with, you know, other English bands who were coming through, the Mercy sound, and there was a lot of bands, but the Beatles, I think, were the inaugurators of that particular genre.
It's very curious, like particularly in America. Why do you think it took an English band to make that change as opposed to an American band? That's
a good question. You know, why did it take Led Zeppelin to bring blues to the attention of an American audience? You know, I mean, that's a difficult one to answer. I mean, I think that while America certainly had its own pop stars, if you will, or early rockers, okay, I think the Beatles, coming from England, doing the Ed Sullivan Show, which was an incredible launch. You couldn't ask for a bigger launch, the largest television audience in history at that time. And I think it lit the fuse on what had obviously been a smoldering musical scene in America for a long time. And they did it so well, and for all the things I previously described, they had all the bases covered right out of the gate.
So you're interested in playing drums. How does that translate to you actually getting a drum kit and actually learning how to play drums?
Interesting. I didn't have a drum kit at first. I convinced my dad to buy me a snare drum. And so I sat in the basement of our house in Arlington, Virginia with a snare drum, and I'd take a paperback book and tape it on top of it to cut the volume down a little bit. Then I had a little LP plastic portable stereo that played 12-inch, records. And I would sit down in the basement and I would play along to the Monkees. I would play to Last Train to Clarksville. I would play to Incense and Peppermints. I would play to all the songs that were on the radio of the day on one drum and try to figure out how the beats were, etc. So I didn't have a full drum set for a while after I started playing, okay? So that's, when I finally had a full drum set, there was a lot more options. I'm sure some record producers would appreciate it if you just didn't have a drum set, just had a kick snare and a hat. That would make their life easier.
Obviously, being a drummer is not something that you can do on your own. It's definitely one of those instruments where you need...
It's a group sport for sure.
It's a group sport.
Team sport.
Yeah, team sport. How did you hook up with other people and get playing in a band situation?
Well, actually, that didn't happen until I moved to California. I moved to Los Angeles in 1969. And so while I was in Virginia, there was guys around me playing in bands, but I wasn't in a band. I was sort of watching the scene go on. Not a big scene. And then when I moved to California in 1969, I started to meet other people in Los Angeles, obviously, because it was a more target-rich environment, if you will. And then I started playing in bands in high school, so there was just more opportunity. So I never went to the prom because I was always in the band that was playing at the prom. And that carried on through, I went to university, that carried on through my university years. And then it wasn't until I graduated from university with a Bachelor of Arts in Philosophy. I think I'm the only drummer in Los Angeles with a Bachelor of Arts degree in philosophy. And I went back to LA to go after my dream full time. So not really a linear path, as it were. But once I got back to Los Angeles, that's what I did for the next, 15 years.
When you were playing in bands at high school, were you playing cover songs or were you playing original songs?
Cover songs mostly, and my thought on that, well, almost exclusively cover songs at that particular point in time. But, my thing is like all work is honorable. And all musicians at some point in their life play cover material. Whether you're playing top 40 hits in a nightclub or you're playing Sting's originals as a sideman in his band, you're playing somebody else's music, right? As it were. But, playing other people's songs, especially the hits of the day, which are so much fun to put yourself in those shoes, doing that 4 sets a night, 6 nights a week, that really hones your craft and teaches you, what works and what doesn't.
Just a quick interruption to say thank you for watching the podcast. Please hit the subscribe button. It's very early days for us and we're trying to grow things and you can help. Please share, hit the subscribe button. It makes a massive difference. Thank you very much.
So you've moved back to LA to pursue your dream. What work are you doing there? What bands? What's the first band that you managed to play with?
Well, poverty plays a big role in every musician's life, especially at the beginning. So I was fortunate and I got a job at Westwood Music's drum shop. Westwood Music was a great music store, an old school music store run by Fred Wallachy, a few blocks down from UCLA, and the place where all the players of the day came. Jackson Browne, the Eagles, all the people in the late 70s, mid 70s, late 70s scene were going to Westwood Music. So I got a job there in the drum shop, which was upstairs. Working in a drum shop for a young player is a fantastic opportunity. You get to meet all the touring players who come through town. You get to keep up on the trends. You get to keep up on the gear, obviously, which is a great thing. So it was while I was working that was my day job. And then through that, I met a drummer whose brother was in a band called the Heaters. And when they came to a point in their career where they were looking for a drummer, this was about 1978, 9, I was able to get an audition, and I passed the audition, as John said, and I was hired, and that was my first sort of big time, small time band, if you will. They were like a pretty hot band on the LA scene. We were playing the Whiskey, the Troubadour, the Starwood, Madame Wong's, all the hot nightclubs of the day, and that's also where I was working when I got a call from Tom Petty's head roadie, Alan Wydell, about a drum set. And that's what led me to meeting Stan Lynch, and that's what's led to my 45-year friendship with him.
So that all came from working in the music store?
Correct.
I know that you've had desk tapes of the Heaters that we've I've digitised in the studio for you. How long did the Heaters last? And then what was the next move from there?
Well, the Heaters had been around for a couple of years before I joined. They had one initial album released on Areola Records. They were the next hot thing. Robert Hilburn, the esteemed LA Times music critic at the time, had pegged them and 10 other bands in an article he did on us, where they were the hot bands on the go at that time in the late 70s, the new wave, if you will, okay? I played with them for just under 2 years, and when they moved on, then I had sort of a profile on the local scene. So a band called The Pop, who were recording for Areola Records, they approached me, and I auditioned with them, and I took the seat in their band, and I made a record with them at Sound City, of all places.
Oh wow!
Yeah, the famous Sound City, in the big room where a zillion great bands have recorded, where my friend Stan did his seminal work with the Heartbreakers on Damn the Torpedoes, and I got to record an EP in the big room at Sound City on there used to be, when there were such things as 2-inch tape in the world, and we were recording in that fashion, if you could get some free time, usually in the middle of the night or when an artist wasn't using a room and the engineer had an in, you could get in there and get some work done. And so that's how we made Hearts and Knives, the Pops 1980-81 EP. And it was really interesting. We did, I don't know, 6 tracks in 2 days or 3 days. I mean, it was pretty on the go.
Yeah.
And so I played with the Pop. Then that segued into another trio called the Cheaters, which was with a guy named Warren Pash, who wrote Private Eyes with Hall & Oates.
Oh, wow.
That's what had put him on the map. And another friend of mine named Kent Hausman, who's a Northern California guitarist, a real guitar stud. And I thought we were really on our way. We played, the first time we played the Whiskey, we got a great little one-sentence review by Robert Hilburn that said, the opening act, the Cheaters, played a promising mix of rock in a Rolling Stones Tom Petty vein. And I thought, that's pretty good. And then the band broke up a week later. So, the vagaries of the life. But
so the band had a deal. Why? What would cause the band to break up?
Poverty and personalities.
Okay.
I think. It's always difficult. Like, it's how long can you hold your breath?
Yeah.
I got a lot of respect for people who can grit it out and go for the long run. I mean, looking back in retrospect, there were times that I wish I'd held my breath longer, but at the time, you do what you have to do. And, it can be when you're looking for gas in your car or to buy a pair of drumsticks or to have a burrito or whatever, you're really living pretty
tough.
Yeah,
Doing
exactly.
it tough.
So it turns into a case of like, how much do I love this and how long can I keep going? And also, you hear no a lot.
Were you still working at the drum shop at this particular point?
I was. I worked at a couple. I worked at another one called Valley Arts Drum Shop in the San Fernando Valley. Both places with a really good friend of mine named Gary Levine, who was a good drummer and also really a great retail drum guy to go to. He really knew his craft. And as I said, being in those environments, you got musicians coming in and out all day long. So it's like you go where the activity is, I guess.
Yeah. The Cheaters.
I know, it's confusing. The Heaters, the Cheaters, the Pop.
The Cheaters break up. What happens next for you then?
I took the seat in the Pop. Unfortunately, with the Pop, I think I was joining a band that had come over the top of its parabola. They had been signed with great fanfare by Clive Davis, and they too had made their first record. So both of the records I made with these other bands were sophomore efforts. And the way the music business, when there was such a thing, used to work was that record companies were looking to find a band with a songwriter or songwriters that they could nurture and develop them into something. That concept is laughable nowadays. Nowadays you've got 15 minutes to show them your stuff or you're out the door. And so, but at that time there was such a thing as having a record deal, which is essentially a recoupable loan, but at least it would allow you to rent an apartment, put food on the table, rehearse, and go into a studio and make demos and hopefully records. So, but as I said, with the Pop, unfortunately the timing wasn't great for me. The band was experiencing this thing, the pressures that I just mentioned to you of, multiple songwriters, not as enthusiastic an audience as they initially have. Like, the sheen had worn off the shiny new object. Yeah. Which is just the way it is. It's the way it is in Los Angeles and New York, and it's the way it is in the film business, the way it is in the music business. We like the bright, shiny new objects, and once they've got a little tarnish on them or they're not, doing it.
To survive and pay rent and stuff, you've got a job working in a music shop. The Pop's gone, the Cheaters are all done. The next thing that came along for you is going out on the road with Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers?
Actually not. I took a break for a couple of years and got a real day job. A friend of mine was working at a software company, a distributor actually. If this is going on the Wayback Machine, but when personal computers, the ones with the big deep monitors like this, were first out, there was a lot of software being written and made for them, a lot of games. Yep. Okay, And a friend of mine was working at a company in LA called Soft Cell that was started by a couple of entrepreneurs, and they offered me a job there. And performing and sales work has a lot of the same energy to it, okay? And anyway, I did that for 3 years. And it was really good because it's the first time I actually had some money in my bank account, and I bought a car, and it was really good. And the company was quite successful. Anyway, I was doing that, and then one night in, late 1985, I got a phone call, and it was Stan. I was in bed with my wife, Janice, reading a book, and the phone rang, and it was Stan. And out of the blue, he just said, I want you to come on the road with me and do my drums on this next tour. And I was like, wow, okay, that's a big question.
Yeah.
And so it turned out that the Heartbreakers and Bob Dylan had actually hired, I guess, for lack of a better word, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers as his band. Mm-hmm. They had just come down to Australia and New Zealand. They had done a tour here, which Gillian Armstrong made a film of. And then they were going to go back and do another 50 shows in the United States, the summer of '86. Then they were going to go to Europe and the Middle East. And so Stan hired me to be his drum tech, which was an amazing step into the big leagues for me.
Yeah. You did the drum teching stuff, and at some point you were playing percussion as well.
Yeah, the way that worked out was I started out, I did the first 50 show tour, which let me tell you, that was a dive into the deep end for a guy. I'd never been on the road, I'd never ridden in a tour bus, I'd never played, set up and done arena shows, but it was really great. Stan's my best friend. If it wasn't for him, I never would have had most of the opportunities that I've had. I'm grateful to him forever for that. And we had a lot of fun. And, I took care of his drums. I was part of what they call the Backline Crew. Mm-hmm. So each of the guys in the band, Petty, Mike Campbell, Ben Mont, Howie, and Stan all had one dedicated guy who cared for their gear and would sit directly behind them, behind the amp line, behind the drum set, whatever, during the shows, make sure that everything went fine. If anything broke, fix it fast. And then travel with the band, along with the rest of the crew, the sound and lighting and stage guys. So it was a really great experience. During the course of that, I got to play stand-in. Sometimes he didn't come to sound checks. Since I can play, I got to sit in and play sound checks with Dylan and Petty, which was just an absolute hoot. I made a video with Bob Dylan once. We were in San Francisco at the Shoreline Amphitheater, and Stan had, I don't know where he was, but he wasn't there. And Elliot Roberts, who was the manager, had come in and said, we've got a public service thing for this Cabot House in LA. They're coming in to film before the doors opened at this amphitheater, big amphitheater. He said, can you sit in with the band? I said, gulp, sure. And so I did. I mean, it was, I was such a June bug. So I get up there behind the drum set that I just finished setting up for Stan on stage. Petty's playing bass, which is his original instrument, weapon of choice. Mike's on guitar. And then there's Bob Dylan. And there's no discussion of what the song is or what's going to happen next, as it is with Bob. And Elliot comes up and he goes, you want to fix this? So I had my laminate hanging around my neck, so I flipped it around backwards. And then I'm sitting there going, okay. And then Bob starts into a song that none of us had ever heard called Thank God. And we all just sort of fell in. So for 2 minutes and 40 seconds of, sort of excitement / terror, I did this thing. And then, I don't know, a few weeks later, somebody called Janice up in LA while we were still out on the road and said, hey, I'm sure I just saw David playing drums on this thing, on this public service thing with Bob Dylan. Is that possible? And she said, yeah. So those types of experiences led to, in between those two Dylan Petty tours, we did a US tour with Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers called the Rock and Roll Caravan. Mm-hmm. It was an old school 3-band, traveling juggernaut with the Del Fuegos from Boston Open, the Georgia Satellites were the middle act, and Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers were the headliners. And Stan, bless him, invited me to play on some of the songs on that tour. So I don't know how many songs they were playing a night, 15, 16. And so I maybe got to play on, 8 of them, 10 of them. And so it was just a mostly handheld percussion, tambourines, maracas, shakers, different stuff. But I got to stand on the riser next to his drum riser next to him in all these amazing arenas and places for, I don't know, 45 shows or whatever. And it was so much fun. Because I'd been a diehard Heartbreakers fan since 1977, long before I met the band. And it was like the lost weekend for me because I couldn't sync the show, as Stan would say, but I could, I certainly was extremely careful because they're a rhythmically very conscious band, right? And so it was really great. It was, it's an out-of-body experience for me, it was, in Madison Square Garden, the Forum in LA.
Wow.
Yeah, big,
Madison Square Gardens would have been impressive.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. It's a real rub your stomach, pat your head exercise for anybody, I think, when you're standing there and you're looking at, I don't know, 18, that place holds 24,000 people, but these most of the sports arenas in America are like 18 or 20. And it's a real, out-of-body experience to be standing on stage doing something musically while you're looking at somebody in the 10th row and you're thinking like, gee, I hope I don't lose my place here. we in the second verse or the third verse, But yeah, it was just an amazing experience. And because I was so invested in the Heartbreakers, because they really were my favorite guys, they were my band, I was in love with them, And so the fact that the drum roadie got a chance to come up and do something on stage with them was a really great thing for me, And I thank and respect and I'm grateful to Stan to this day for giving me that opportunity because, it was and is a big time famous musician and he could have had whoever he wanted to and he picked his bro, me, for that tour and we had a hoot.
What happens next?
What happened next was we did the last Dylan Petty tour in Europe, which ended with 4 nights at Wembley Arena in London, which was an amazing place. And then I came home, and by pre-arrangement, a week later, I flew to Lake Tahoe and got married.
Yeah.
And I married my wife, Janice, who I've been with since August of 1979.
And Janice is an Australian.
She is. Janice is an Australian from Melbourne who I met when I was playing with the Heaters. In LA, she crashed a party at my house. She and another girl stole a golf cart at a wedding at a local golf club and got kicked out. And her girlfriend was dating the singer in my band at the time, this guy named Daryl Battaglia. And they came to my house, crashed the party. I met her. She was this exotic, beautiful blonde creature. I couldn't understand, but every like fourth or fifth word she said, she had a heavy Australian accent. I was like, huh? Okay. And so that's 45 years ago. Wow. So we went to Lake Tahoe and got married. Stan was my best man.
Oh wow.
And then I won't say I settled down, but I for a year or two I sort of half-heartedly looked for other opportunities to do what I had been doing for Stan. Mm-hmm. But I decided, I made a decision that I just wasn't a fan of the travel.
Yeah.
I'd kind of like The Wizard of Oz. I'd seen the guy behind the green curtain. I got a really good look. I did, 120 shows with the Heartbreakers and Dylan, which is plenty to get, your arms around what this is going to look like for the rest of time if you do this, and if you're lucky enough to do it at that level.
Yeah.
Lots of times, careers are like, So, and I'm not saying that I was, good enough to be offered work at that level, but if I had been, I could just see what it was going to be like. And I didn't know if I wanted to be on a bus with 10 other guys pounding down the highways every night for the rest of time. Nothing wrong with it. I'm just saying I'm more of a homebody. And I sort of figured that early.
I know that you're into animal rescue and that sort of thing. Is that something that you were doing in LA?
Indeed. When I got off the road then, I got another job doing something similar to what I'd done before, which was selling things for people. And then I had a side band on the side, but I can talk about that later. But I met a lady who was going up to an old dusty ranch in Topanga Canyon, which is above Malibu, in the hills, the Santa Monica Mountains. Anyway, long story short, there was a place up there where this old lady was sort of rescuing / warehousing dogs and cats. And I got wind of it, and I went up there, and it was basically the beginning of what's been a almost a 35-year career in domestic animal rescue, I guess you would call it. I found something that really spoke to me, and so I started going up there every weekend. I started learning how to do it. I'm a pretty smooth talker, so I was able to get a lot of dogs and cats out of there and adopted, and that led to me putting together an organization of about 20 or 25 people, volunteers, who I could count on, so to come help me on weekends at different rescue organizations around LA. I'm big on volunteering. You never know where the roads are going to take you. When I moved to Australia in 2006, I knew one person on the Gold Coast when I moved here. And I said, so where's the local animal shelter? So he pointed me to the Animal Welfare League of Queensland, which is out in Koombaba. And I went out there to volunteer, happened to meet the president that day. We sat down and talked for a couple hours. She found out I'd been doing it for a minute, and she offered me a job. Okay. And so my volunteer activity and passion for that cause led to 6 years over 2 different stints there as their director of special projects and then their director of fundraising. And that was like world-class stuff. I mean, they run 6 shelters, take in 10,000 animals a year. And I really learned what I was doing there in the world of animal rescue, and hopefully was able to, help them make a difference.
You've taken a couple of Greyhound racing dogs as pets.
Yeah, look, all of the animals that we've ever had have been rescues, okay? And they've all found their way to me. Our beautiful Greyhound Cookie, who's been gone a couple years now, she soldiered on to almost to the age of 15, which is long for a Greyhound. But anyway, she'd been surrendered by her trainer, as Greyhounds are at age 2 or 3 when their racing careers are no longer making money for people. And she was one of the lucky ones. She didn't get shot and dumped out the back somewhere. She was surrendered to the Animal Welfare League, and I came across her there one day, and I was really intrigued. She's beautiful, magnificent, muscly, 37-kilogram beast of a dog, and the gentlest, sweetest disposition. I fell for her hard. I brought her home for a test run with Janice, with the admonition that if she looked at the 2 cats we had sideways, it was all over. Anyway, yeah, and she spent the next 10 years with us. And so now I have a real affinity for Greyhounds, and I do some sort of behind-the-scenes work with some great organizations in America and here in Australia as well.
Because I guess it's one of those things, people don't really think of Greyhounds as being pets.
No, unfortunately, they've been commercialized. They're the poor man's racehorse, is what they are. People have just gotten hip to the fact of what great pets they are. And I ask any Greyhound owner, and they'll just tell you that was the best thing that ever happened to them. They're hilarious. They spend the first 3 years of their life in a totally non-domestic environment. They're in a commercial track, they're being trucked around, they're living in cages, and suddenly they come to your home on day one. They don't know what the garage door going up is. What's this, a TV? Stairs? Never seen them. So they go through this process of working their way into this domestic lifestyle, and it's wonderful to see. Yeah, wonderful to see.
So you said there was a side project that you had in America. You were going to talk about that. What?
The Rockinghams.
Ah, the Rockinghams, that's
Fabulous
right.
Rockinghams, named after the street that O.J. Simpson lived on. I don't know why we chose that, but anyway, we did. Yeah, the Rockinghams were some guys from the film business, a composer, a screenwriter, and a guy who did promotion. And they had a Tuesday night music club sort of thing. And somehow they got wind of me and they invited me to come down and jam with them, which I did. And that turned into, I guess about 10 years. So we had this great band in Violet. Tuesday night was it. Kids got something on, PTA, wife wants to do something. Nope, Tuesday night is for the band. So by putting that first, we were able to develop a good rehearsal work ethic. And then we'd do shows around town. And our favorite spot was a place called Rusty Surf Ranch on the Santa Monica Pier in Santa Monica, out over the water.
Yeah.
Okay, which was just fabulous and so much fun. And so we covered, they were cover songs, but they were more oblique. I wouldn't actually call it top 40. There was a lot of old blues. There was John Hyatt. There was just stuff that was from great songwriters, but not quite so much stuff that you'd be hearing on the radio.
Okay.
All right, and that was a fabulous experience. That's kind of how I kept my hand or my drums in the game, as it were, when I didn't want to play commercially anymore. Because everything I ever did in LA was all original music based. Mm-hmm. I never played in a top 40 band in Los Angeles. Well, one time I did with a band that came down, a 7-piece horn band. We thought we were the next Chicago. And that broke up under the weight of 7 guys living in one apartment. And anyway, it's another day. But I'd always been an original band. So the ethos and and what we were all chasing was the big record deal, become rock stars, do shaving commercials and all that, like Mel said in Lethal Weapon. The reality is, 0.1% of people actually have a career, that's ongoing. And that's what's so fabulous about, another thing about knowing Stan is that I've been by his side, if not on the tours I did prior to that and post that until he left the band in the early 90s. I was privy, I guess you could say. He would share what was going on, and what records they were making and what was happening on the road and stuff. And just watching their ascent, I've never before or since seen a band that actually made it on a super stratospheric international level as them. I'd been friends with the guys and seen it close up. Yeah. It was quite amazing. And including all the hassles and ups and downs and crazy things that go on. It wasn't all just like, a shot to the moon. There was,
no. I guess that's one of the things that, from a performing musician's point of view, is the public doesn't get to see the machinations of what's going on in the background.
Totally. And God bless everyone who buys a ticket or an album or whatever they do now to support the arts, because, it really was a tribal thing. I picked up on that early when I had the fortunate opportunity to ride the buses around America and Europe with the Heartbreakers and Dylan. You would go to X marks the spot, and people had made plans, sometimes for a very long time, and they'd traveled great distances, and they'd made financial sacrifices to come be here in this spot that one night, to see this event and hear this event. And it was just fabulous, and I had a huge appreciation for that. For the effort that they put in. I mean, I'm speaking as a fan here. They certainly weren't coming to see me, but they were coming to see the Heartbreakers or Dylan. And the idea that you could create something that would hold enough interest and gravitas and popularity, being in a popular band, for people to do that, that was something that was very attractive. The reality is that, it happens to almost no one. And your journey or my journey or anyone's journey through that original music, trying to make it, and that we're talking about a snapshot in time too. Now there is no record business per se, now it's there's no record companies nurturing artists or things of that nature. It's just the business model has shifted.
It is a very different business model than what it used to be back then. Obviously, record companies still exist, but the way they operate now is very different. People don't generally tend to buy a hard copy merchandise.
Correct.
Although I guess there's still merch to be sold, like hats, shirts.
Yeah.
But it's not the actual music anymore.
No.
Music is almost the free part of it.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's unfortunately, we talk to a lot of writers who don't think that the original file sharing idea was such a great thing. It's interesting. Now, the way to make a living now is you got to go play live in front of people, whether you're 30 or 50 or 70, and that's where you sell your T-shirts and your own CDs and your own hats and your own mugs and whatever.
Yeah.
That's how the money is made there.
That would make it awfully difficult for someone who was a great songwriter but not necessarily a great performer.
Well, yeah, not everybody wants to go do the traveling band thing, and there is still a path through. Stan, for instance, has become a great writer. He always wanted to write songs, but there really wasn't the bandwidth for him to do that in Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, because they already had Tom Petty, who's one of the greatest songwriters America's ever produced. But Stan, when he left the band, his first port of call was he went to Texas to see Don Henley, and Don, to his great credit, they were already friends, but Don took him under his wing. I think it's safe to say that. And he started working on records with Don Henley and Danny Korchmar, Cooch, back in the mid-'80s. And that led to him becoming an extremely skilled, accomplished songwriter and producer. He's produced dozens of bands. He produces Don. I mean, he worked his way up to that level. You know, I'm not sure what people's, from the outside looking in, what their view of it is. Like, well, doesn't the band just split everything? You know, and the answer is no. You know, the person who writes the song gets the publishing. As far as making money, you know, I mean, I think you need to be prepared. If I was a young person starting out today, I would be really clear-eyed about, number one, learning the machinations of the business. Like, I didn't always pay attention in the early days. And for goodness sakes, don't trust a manager because, you know, Colonel Parker on down, I mean, that's all well documented. Look out for your own. Look out for your own business. Learn about the business. Learn about contracts. Learn about what managers do. Learn about what house sound guy does. Learn about what club owners do. Pay attention and, you know, protect yourself. And find a path to monetizing what it is that you do, because, you know, it's not free to play. You know, you got to support yourself.
I guess it's always been the case where to be educated in as many areas as you possibly can just serves your best interests.
Look, if I can use you as an example, you know, you're the hardest working musician I know in the modern world that we live in. You play live gigs constantly in all permutations of your bands, okay? You run a successful recording studio right next door to where we are here now that takes in everybody from individual songwriters to groups to whatever. People come in here and make videos in your soundstage. I mean, you have a lot of irons in the fire, and to your great credit, you have taken the time to learn the craft. I mean, besides the fact that you're a highly skilled musician, you've taken the time to learn the craft of running a commercial studio. You've learned about videography. You've learned about editing. I mean, these are all things that, you know, the average Joe just doesn't have a complete and professional grasp of like you do. But in doing so, you have diffused the number of revenue streams that you have.
I guess I've done that for a couple of different reasons. It's something that I'm interested in. So I will spend the time. Having to diversify is one of those things that's almost necessary these days in order to be able to make a career and stay viable.
But not everyone recognizes that. B, not everyone has the energy or the intelligence or the drive to do it, which you have. I mean, it's a big job.
I think you have to have a passion for it. If you don't have a passion for it, then I guess you wouldn't stick with it. There's a lot of risk involved in going down that path. Like it's quite financially.
Well, yeah.
It's quite a financial burden.
No, you got to be all in, man. You got all the chips into the center of the table.
So that's part of the other. Yeah, I was going to say the other side of the coin is, by the time you've invested, you're not only your time but money. You're all in. So it's.
So you better make it.
It's sink or swim.
Yeah. You better make it work. You know?
So you have to make it work.
And you are. But I mean, I guess I'm just respectful of the fact of how much work it is.
That's the biggest difference between doing something as a hobby and doing something as a career. Is it's not always good times. You've got to work through the things that are
challenging.
And it's that thing. Sometimes you're very disciplined and can stick with it, and sometimes the discipline lets you down a bit.
The weak ones fall, the strong carry on. Straight out of darkness, Tom Petty. You know, it's interesting because there's two sides to that too. There's the side of a hired player who's looking for a gig, and there's the side of a front man and a band leader like you, who's the boss. The buck stops with you. Like, you know, you're the lead guitarist, you're the lead singer, you're the front of the band, you're the front of your business. You know, so it's a different thing for you, from the position that you're in and the responsibilities that you have. You know, to hire players, make sure they're up to snuff, make sure, you know, that they're showing up to the gigs, they're playing at the level that you need. I mean, that's a whole nother, you know, the personnel side of it is a whole nother thing. You surrounded yourself with incredible players.
I've been really lucky in that department.
And while we're on it, the side of the side of the business, where you're booking the gigs or you're dealing with booking agents. I mean, you use a variety of ways to get work, but still, that's a whole nother kettle of fish right there.
Yeah, and there are a lot of parts of that are difficult to manage. Difficult because they're not the sort of thing that I would choose to do if I had a choice.
No, but at the end of the day,
I mean, particularly the most important, it almost would seem to me that these days, the most important thing is marketing. It's almost more important than actually
well,
having a great product.
And that's one thing in the old days, that was sort of the part of the Faustian deal with the devil with record companies, is they had, when there were such things as record stores, I mean, they could, put you on a billboard at Tower Records. They could, drive the play of your latest single with radio stations across America and the world. I mean, all those things. They
had all of the marketing tools.
Totally, all the promotional stuff. Whereas now, the digitization of the world, right? The good news about that is that it's made everything more democratic, and the bad news is that it's flooded the world with content, not all of which is good. Okay, but it's also made people have to look out for their own welfare, their own well-being, as far as how they're going to get the word on their product out there, and in a very crowded channel with a lot of stuff that's not really so great. I mean, it can be very challenging, I think.
Yeah, can be. So you've come to Australia.
Australia,
mate.
Australia, mate. G'day.
We met because you brought a bunch of tapes that you had that you wanted to digitise, but also said you were songwriting. You had a bunch of songs that you wanted to do. What prompted you to do the songwriting?
Well, full disclosure, when you and I first met, I had fire safes with tape recordings going back 40 years, and the acetate on tapes, as you know, decays. And I wanted to memorialize some records I'd played on, a lot of live performances, demos, et cetera, et cetera. So you and I spent, whatever it was, a year or longer at the beginning of our friendship, with me paying you, and we sat in the studio, and you were able to take this music, dump it into Pro Tools, digitize it, clean it up. I mean, we had a blast, and I made a bunch of CDs out of those, and the artwork and all that stuff. It was great. Our relationship then, working together, and I'd always wanted to write songs, and I'd always been watching other people do it, but I don't sing for openers, and I'm not a multi-instrumentalist like you are. I hear things in my head, good things.
The voices.
They're all in singing nice harmonies, the voices are. I hear things in my head, and I fancied that I wanted to teach myself how to write, a half-decent, non-embarrassing lyric, right? And so our relationship, full disclosure, morphed into that, into me coming to you with initially pathetic scraps of what I thought was creative, and then you being a multi-instrumentalist, singer, guitarist, bass player, keyboard player, engineer, producer, owning a studio. So you actually started putting some form and shape to these things, sometimes under my direction, sometimes not. I mean, a little bit Bernie and Elton-ish in that, I might come in with an idea or a lyric, but and then you would take it and, turn it into Tiny Dancer or something. Do you know what I mean? Like, where I didn't, because I'm not a schooled musician in that sense. The joy and the satisfaction that I've gotten from that, and you and I have been doing it for a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the mighty Underdog Cadillac, ladies and gentlemen.
So I'll put links down below. We've done 4 albums?
Something like that.
So there's a lot of original material, but you've also looked at writing for a purpose as well. I know that you've with some of the connections that you've had and talked about writing songs to fit a theme.
Yeah, well, I mean, our material is, some of it's pretty cynical, state of the world we live in, the way animals are treated, the way the environment is treated. Some of them are a little more upbeat. Some of them are funny. Because we don't play live, our thing is a complete studio concoction, if you will. Because we don't play live, I've always had a fantasy that I'll just keep sending out our material to people in different areas of the world and in different walks of life until somebody finally says, hey, yeah, that would sound good here. We had one the other day.
Yeah. So there's a track that David wrote, because David, being into animal welfare, there was a song he wrote called "The Last Coyote." It speaks to how wild animals, particularly in California where you were from, eke out a life amongst the city dwellers.
They're getting squeezed out. Yeah, look, it's a metaphor for the larger issue that faces wildlife all around the world, which is too many people, too much progress, and forcing native animals out of their native territory. But example, I sent that off to an organization in the United States called Project Coyote. And to my great surprise, they wrote me back a lovely letter saying, we'd love to use this song in that little video that we made in our future marketing efforts. Is that okay with you? And I said, well, let me think about it. So about 2 seconds later, I said, sure.
Yeah.
So a lot of people have come back to us. You've seen the comments that I've come, and come back and said,
people have been really. It's one of the things I was trying to explain to someone the other day. Most people are incredibly encouraging. They really are willing to cheer you on.
Absolutely.
And wish you the very best, which is it's a wonderful thing.
And here's the thing, there's a lot of value in that. While I'm a professional, I'm also a hobbyist, if that's okay to say it in that way.
Yeah.
But I do it because A, I really enjoy the process. B, I've learned so much working with you, okay? To have a scrap of a lyric or humming a melody or wherever the thing starts, and then seeing the finished product or hearing the finished product, I just love it. I love the whole process. I've learned so much from you. It's been like a postgraduate degree in songwriting. And the fact that some people like it is enough for me.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Well, I guess at the end of the day, all that really matters is do you like it?
Well, yeah. I mean,
and that's all that really does matter.
They say, just like in a lot of other things, don't do anything for anybody else. Do it for yourself.
Yeah.
If somebody else likes it, good on you, and
Yeah. That is what true art actually really is.
Well, yeah. I mean, the history of the world, not just in the recorded arts, but in film, in painting, in sculpture, in writing, has been done in complete isolation, in dark rooms. But a lot of people are not recognized ever. And some of the geniuses that happen long after their deaths. So I don't know what the right expression is, but enjoy the ride, be in the moment,
If you do it for the right reasons, there's always a sense of accomplishment and joy out of what you've done.
I was always focused on playing in an original band. Even though I played in lots of cover bands, my goal was always to play in a band where somebody was writing the original material.
Yeah.
Okay? And coming full circle to now where I'm a hobbyist writing original material, but the stuff that I believe in, that you and I are putting our heart and souls into, but there's many other ways to skin the cat.
You've had experience in several different organisations, including working at a university, and your job was to acquire funding, and you've done a similar thing for Animal Welfare League. Is there anything that you do in the business world that you would say has applications for someone playing music?
The thing that ties all these things together is volunteering, okay? If I hadn't started volunteering at animal shelters in LA 35 years ago, that wouldn't have led me to the Animal Welfare League here. If I hadn't worked the 6 years there, where I call that my PhD in fundraising, I never would have gotten the job at Griffith University here on the Gold Coast, where I worked for 9 years and raised tens of millions of dollars for medical research and scholarships for deserving students. So the volunteering thing has led me some really interesting paths. In terms of transferable skill sets, performing is an extroverted activity, sales work is an extroverted activity. Musicians work with each other And by and large, we can be contentious people, but we can also be highly personable, super joyful, super soulful. But I think those kind of skills, when you're dealing with people, like in my last job, in fundraising, for instance, there's a lot of face-to-face activity. And people do business with people that they like and that they enjoy talking with and interacting with. So, if that sort of thing comes to you a little more naturally, perhaps, than others, I've just always said that, sales work is quite performative, the same way that performing music is performative, A lot of people they look at me with horror. They couldn't do it. They couldn't walk into a room full of 25 people and go, "G'day," and talk to them off the cuff. I have a lot of faults, but one of my superpowers is that I can pretty much establish rapport with anybody quickly just because I'm interested in people, And I mean, like I said, I'm
Is it a difficult thing to ask people for large sums of money?
not when you believe in what you're asking for. I'm working for the last 5-6 years. I've worked on a spinal injury project that we're going to have a clinical trial here at Griffith University, Gold Coast University Hospital, in the next couple of months that we had to raise, I don't know, not $10 million just to get off the ground. But the promise that holds for people that I know and friends that I care about a lot who are living their lives with paralysis in wheelchairs, the very real possibility that this surgical technology that has been developed might be able to help them, that drives me like crazy. It's easy for me to ask anybody for money to fund that because I'm a true believer. The same way with animal welfare, I don't mind asking anybody for money there too because I'm a true believer. So,
Would you say having a passion for it is what?
Having a passion for it is what makes you dangerous.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, phoning it in is one thing, but actually believing in what you're doing, it's great. I mean, it's heartbreaking too because if you're invested in something and you're not getting the results that you feel you should be, and that can be, challenging. As they say in the world of professional fundraising, it's a lumpy business, meaning, hey, one day you might close a large gift from someone who sees your vision and believes in it, and then you might go into a drought where everybody says no. But that's a similarity too. Musicians have to have a lot of resiliency because they hear no a lot too. Particularly, again, in the world of creating original content, original material.
Would you say that self-confidence or self-belief is the thing that is really required to get through?
Yeah, look, let's face it.
Because obviously there are times when things aren't going your way.
Yeah, look, it's a fine line between, self-confidence, a little self-love, and being a royal pain. Okay. You don't want to overcook that one. I guess the main thing is that if you don't believe in it, why should somebody else believe in it?
That's true.
I mean, that's pretty much what it comes down to. I've had I don't know if checkered's the right word, but I played music professionally a long time ago, but I've still continued to play just in different iterations. I've figured out how to, write songs and have fun with that.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So there's always been music in my life, but then, practical realities like living and not being poor also raise their heads too.
What would you say would be the highlight of all of the things that you've done?
This interview right here. This is it, man. We're on the mountaintop right now, baby. That's a difficult question because as you go through life, hopefully, if you're fortunate, there are many highlights. And there are highlights at that particular juncture. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Mesozoic period, first gig. Jurassic, bigger rooms, whatever. But I think, if I'm being honest, professionally, I got the biggest thrill out of playing percussion on stage with Petty The Heartbreakers because I love the music. They're my most favoriteest songs ever. And I was standing next to my best friend, and that would be Stan Lynch. And I just felt so grateful for that experience. And I felt it was all kind of a blur at the time, when you're playing every night or every...
Oh, I understand that. Yeah.
However, in retrospect, it's been the gift that keeps on giving. But, there's dozens, if not hundreds, of other moments the sooner you start to be mindful. We all hear a lot about mindfulness, but the way I try to look at things now is that yesterday's gone, we can't get it back. Tomorrow is yet to be revealed. Here we are, right here, right now. And to try to really be grateful and appreciate what's happening today, here, now, whatever that might be. Because, the reality is as you get older, you realize that we've all got a number, and you certainly don't want to live your life running in fear of the Grim Reaper at the end of the show. But you want to gain as much satisfaction and pleasure and as much as you can give and in every day and every moment. But you got to think about that, because otherwise it can just.
Alternatively to the highlight, what would you say would be, not to drag things down, but a real low light, and how you made your way out of that?
I'll tell you what, sometimes, I don't know if anybody will agree with me on this, but I think sometimes only speaking for myself, some of my most teachable moments have been the lowest moments. They're the ones where I got the most benefit. It's great to have, a high time, but getting tortured by a good producer in the studio early on in my career, trying to record live drum tracks. Back in the day where you really did have to be a slave to the groove and hold steady for 3.5 minutes, and not overplay and not do all these other, use some dynamics and all these things that, nobody taught you.
Being in a recording studio.
24-track recording studio.
That was a great learning experience?
Absolutely. Yeah, that whole thing about hearing what you really sound like and the, oh man, that's just not good enough, that's sort of a low point. Hearing no a lot, rejection, when you put your heart and soul into something with original music, okay, whether you're the author or not. Like I was never the author in any of the bands I was in, but they were my bands, and we were, material would be worked up by a band, created by a band, even if one person ultimately got the credit for the lyric and the melody. Having so much invested in it and then hearing no, particularly again back in the days when there were record companies, they passed on the demo, they don't want us. You can start to take that in a highly personal sense that I'm nothing, this is, I don't have anything to offer here. So those are low moments. I think everybody sort of second guesses, is this what should I really be doing this? Is this really is this my jam? Am I like woefully not cut out for this, Particularly, I think that's even more a case nowadays with when we were growing up and coming up, there was no social media. So I think news traveled slower, literally by the tom-toms and the smoke signals, Now, there's a lot of ways to be made to feel like you're marginalized or minimalized or not good enough. Just go on Facebook or Instagram or any 1,000 other social media channels, and you see people apparently living incredible lives, doing incredible things, and it just works. It can work on your head if you allow it to.
What is on the horizon for David Hoskot? I know that you've recently retired from the university gig. What else is on the agenda for David these days?
I want to be an astronaut. No, I don't. I'm afraid of heights. I want to be able to devote a little more time to our songwriting project. I've only been out of this job for a couple of months now, so I'm still just sort of enjoying the fact that I feel like the weight of the world's been lifted off my shoulders. So writing with you, we've got a great tune on the run right now. That's certainly up at the top. I'll probably go back to the Animal Welfare League and see if I can find some form of engagement that would be beneficial for them. Not full time, once again, but maybe a couple days a week. See if I can use some of my skills to help them. I've got this wild fantasy that I want to write some short stories. So I've mapped out, a dozen story ideas.
So being creative is a big part of who you are.
Yeah.
You like the creative process.
I do. Whether it's any good and whether anybody likes it, again, I think if I like it, then that's got to be enough.
It's got to be enough.
Otherwise, I'm going to live at the whims of other people, and 10 people might like it, and one person might go, and I'll listen to the guy who goes, and then that'll be, unpleasant.
I guess that's a big lesson, isn't it? Being happy enough and confident enough that if you're happy with it, that's enough.
Actually, I think that the more you're like that, the better you'll do.
Do you have any regrets over your career, of things that you could have done or wish that you had have done differently?
Absolutely. I wish that I tried to be a schooled musician early on. My dad hired a percussionist from the Navy, the United States Navy band.
Because your dad was a military officer.
Yeah, my dad was a colonel in the United States Army. He hired this guy to try to get me drum lessons after I went and saw the Beatles, and it just wasn't, I didn't get it. He was trying to teach me rudiments. That's a huge, and my drummer friends will laugh at me for this because they're all skilled, but I'm not. That's a huge regret. I never took to formal music schooling. Again, in college, I tried to take music theory classes, and for whatever reason, it just was not clicking for me. The only way I learned was playing along to records, jamming with other guys, and a gazillion hours of rehearsals with other musicians. That's how I learned that. That's one thing. I have deep regrets about a couple of bands I was in, who shall remain nameless, who I really thought had a chance at making some serious records and having serious careers. And for reasons, in both cases, I think unrelated to me, in other words, I don't think I was the problem, those bands didn't work out. And I still think about both of them decades later.
What could have been?
Exactly. It's because they both had something on the ball. The problem with all this is that for most of us, these, I'll call them truths, but these awarenesses come to us later in the piece.
Yeah.
Again, it would be great to have a mentor or someone whose advice you trust and can rely on to work with you and look after you earlier in your life. And I had some of those. Stanley was a really good mentor to me. There's probably the best. There's been other people.
The bands that you played in that had recording contracts, were you ever involved in the contractual process?
Lord, no. I was so far down the food chain. I was the drummer, for goodness sake, Scott. Haven't seen my knuckles?
But is that something that affected you though, because of the?
No, because I was young and dumb, and I was happy as Larry just to be playing drums in a band that had a name. I was so thrilled to be at the Whiskey A Go Go. I couldn't stand myself. It was interesting too because I met Stan right as the Heartbreakers were starting to take off, and we became really good friends. And I hung out with him for the band and stuff, and him almost daily for a number of years. For many years before I ever worked with him, before he ever picked up the phone and said, "Hey, you want to be my drum tech?"
Yeah.
Which really opened a lot of doors for me. And as I said, eternally grateful to Stan for those opportunities. Having the opportunity to watch him do his thing and going, "That is so cool," gave me some motivation to try to do something original with these other bands I played with.
Yep.
Where there was only like three or four shots that I took with original bands that really had an opportunity. The fact that, some of them went kaput, and didn't go where I wanted them to go, was a heartache,
Because you were invested.
Yeah, and the thing
I
is,
guess that's
I was
the thing. You've got
invested.
to be if you're doing something. It's that thing. You've got to be all in.
Well, I was all in. I was living the
Do you
life.
do you think that the reason why they went kaput was because possibly someone else wasn't all in the same way?
Yeah, or that, who knows? I mean,
It's a hard thing.
creative
to balance.
personalities are difficult personalities.
They can
You
be.
know what I mean?
Yeah,
Who
absolutely.
Who knows what's
Absolutely.
driving anybody? I mean,
It's very, very difficult to get a group of people who will want to drive the bus in the same direction.
it's almost impossible. I mean, if I can, many times the idiot and the genius are the same person. Okay? And I, with all due respect, I mean, Stan was in the Heartbreakers for almost 20 years, and I got a good close-up look at that. And those guys are probably the best example of, number one, they're all incredible musicians. I mean, really, Ben Montench, Mike Campbell, Stan Lynch, they're the best. and Tommy was a great songwriter. But, you know, in order to keep...
I guess Mike was a great songwriter too.
He was, or he is.
He still is, yeah.
He's written, I mean, you know, Refugee, Boys of Summer, et cetera, et cetera. To keep the wheels on that machine for as long as they did, Stan was there the first 20, and then he moved on to something else, to his writing, producing career. To keep doing that, even at that level, it's hard. It's really hard. Not a lot of people. Some people have one album's worth of good stuff in them. Some have two, maybe. Very rare that you get somebody that can go for 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 years writing at the top of their game. You know, Petty's album, Hypnotic Eye, the last record they released before he died, was their first #1 record.
Oh, wow.
So how weird is that? So, yeah.
Yeah, you had a lot of really good stuff. You and I have been working on a new song that hopefully will be out pretty soon. How many more new songs are up your sleeve?
I got a fair few. I've got a box at home where I've been putting ideas, lyrical ideas, song ideas, like everybody, matchbooks, napkins, kind of like a bird builds a nest, you know, a little twig of this, a little twig of that. And now that I've actually got some time to give that more attention, there's a lot of stuff there. So I know there's a few songs in there for sure, but there's going to be a lot of wading through, you know, to get to that.
Yeah.
So I'm really looking forward to that.
I think the ideas that come through are unique and different because you're coming at it from a different angle.
If you're trying to say that I'm a little special in a sling blade kind of way.
No, I think you should get into singing. That's the next step for you.
Oh God, dude! If I could ever learn to sing before I left the planet, it would be great. I think for me the fun part is that number one, you have to, in order to write songs with somebody, you have to be quite open, and it's an intimate thing. You know, you're sharing something, you're sharing a feeling, a vibe, a whatever.
But it's something you spent a lot of. I'm massively aware that this is something that you've poured your heart and soul into and spent quite a bit of time on too.
That's true, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's good. You know, just because.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I could have been working on something terrible for a long time. But what I'm saying is that we've developed a shorthand that, you know, where we've crossed that threshold long ago, really. I mean, I'm still careful because I don't want to bring in something that's just horrible because I don't want you to look at me like, what's this? And you know how we do this. I'll bring in a lyric and I'll say, this is what I'm thinking, this is where I'm thinking it'll go, and this is until we actually get a track roughed out or you've scat sung something, okay, and then we're a little more refined on what's going to happen. We're still changing stuff till the bitter end. But it's always, here's the thing, in service of the song.
Do you think that over time that your ability to write lyrics is improving?
Absolutely. I mean...
And so would you say it's the more that you do it, the better you get at it?
Well, yeah. I mean, no doubt about it. You know, there's a certain amount of, like, pride of ownership between anything that you and I put our name to that I don't want it to suck.
Well, you can't please everyone.
Correct. You can't.
And there was always going to be someone that goes, it's not my cup of tea.
Totally. But that's the nature of music and art. It's like, I rant and rave about bands, and you're going like, huh? You know? I mean, you know, we get that. I mean, but that's the beautiful part. But being able to, I think it's really important being able to open up. But it's, you know, we've been working together for 15 years almost.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, it's amazing.
Part of that, though, is that things are better because we are honest in our, I mean, like I said, or I was starting to say a minute ago, I never go home from a session thinking like, oh God, that really hurt, man. That was a bummer. I get stuck on certain things that I'm like madly in love with, and you're like, nope, not gonna work. And I'm like, dude, it has to work, you know? And you know what I mean? And so I guess what I'm saying is that, you know, your sandpaper on whatever my initial attempts at a lyric are always good because they always make it better, and we always get it to a better place, and you know, and a better end result. UnderdogCadillac.com, baby.
Yes. Thank you very much for spending some time with me today.
My pleasure, mate.
It's always great doing these because I always learn something new about people that I didn't know before.
What did you learn new today about me?
I learnt today. What did I learn today?
My fabulous taste in Western shirts.
No, you left the working in the music stores, and then you went and did a job working for a software company. I didn't know that about you. There's probably a few other things too, but that's okay.
I'm trying to deal it out to you. Like I said, we've only been working together 15 years. I'm trying to dole it out to you a little bit at a time.
Anyway, thank you very much, Dave.
Thank you, my brother. Appreciate it.
I really appreciate it.
Okay, mate.
And I hope that there was something in that for people watching, and I hope you managed to stick to the end. And we'll see you on the next podcast. Thanks for watching.
Cheers.